Hey everybody, welcome to day 6 of the Throne of Eldraine set review here on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and this is the second last video. Yes, you get a bonus video tomorrow of all of the artifacts and lands, because there's a whole lot of gold cards to talk about. There's 30 gold cards, and the previous videos were 37 cards, and I don't want to make this one ludicrously long. So we're going to take a look at all of the gold cards, both regular gold and hybrid today, from a limited perspective. But let's get on into the first card with Dance of the Manse. Dance of the Manse is X white-blue for a sorcery at rare. Return up to X target artifact and or non-aura enchantment cards, each with converted mana cost X or less, from your graveyard to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures in addition to their other types. I don't see this actually working. Those artifact enchantments have to actually get into your graveyard in the first place. You need to have 8 mana. If you want to make them creatures, you need to not be dead. There's too many ifs here. There's too much jank. Returning a smaller number also doesn't sound terribly likely or useful. I think this is a commander plant, and I think it's unplayable in limited. I have Dance of the Manse at an F. Up next is Doom Foretold. Doom Foretold is 2 white-black for an enchantment at rare. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-land, non-token permanent. If that player can't, they discard a card, they lose 2 life. You draw a card, you gain 2 life. You create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. Then you sacrifice Doom Foretold. It's too many words. I don't even want to understand this to give this a grade. So, every turn, the player needs to sack something that's not a land or a token. Then, if they can't, and it'll have to be your opponent, because you can never be the person, because you have to sack Doom Foretold if it's the only permanent you have left. So your opponent has to eventually sack all of their permanents before you sacrifice all of your permanents. They discard a card. Then if they can't do that, then a bunch of totally fine stuff happens. 2 life drain, you get a 2/2, you draw a card. I don't know. You have to play stuff into this to be sacrificed. Otherwise, you're eventually going to have to sacrifice Doom Foretold before you get the benefit off of it. Making your opponent sacrifice something every turn is handy. And if they do give up and they lose their board state, they still have to eventually discard their hand before it stops happening. So ultimately, this should theoretically deprive your opponent of everything, but if and only if it doesn't deprive you of your board state first. I have no clue. Honestly, it just sounds like too much jank, and there's just too much symmetrical-ish effects here, except if you fall behind first, then you just lose Doom Foretold, which started this whole mess. I'll let someone else try this. I'm starting this at, like, I don't know, an M? A P? I don't know. I don't think it's any good. I don't think it's any good. But maybe it's awesome. But I don't think so. M for Doom Foretold. Up next is Drown in the Loch. Drown in the Loch is blue-black for an instant add-on common. Choose one. Counter target spell with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard, or destroy target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. This card seems pretty good. The trick is that your opponent needs to have cards in their graveyard, but blue-black has a fair bit of incidental mill and direct mill, which I don't think you should be playing just to enable this. This isn't countering much, if anything, on turn 2 or 3 or 4, probably. It might kill a small thing, but not much. It is going to take some time, but in the later game, this is hopefully, and remember, the graveyard isn't an instantaneously filling thing. It does fill at variable rates game to game. Sometimes it never fills up. Sometimes it's totally full by turn 5. And as we said, there are ways to help that out. But it becomes a super cheap unconditional counter or removal. Odds are it just does so much in the mid to late game often enough, even without some of the incidental mill value that is specifically in these colors, then it's a very high pick and a great card. What I wouldn't do is throw in bad mill just to fuel this. I'd stick to the incidental mill, the bonus value mill, and just playing this as a later game card. My big question is, will this be a first pick or not? I think it's probably in the B to B plus range. We'll have to see how likely it is that you want to jump on 2 colors, though, right at the start. Up next is Escape to the Wilds. Escape to the Wilds is 3 red-green for a sorcery at rare. Exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play cards exiled this way until the end of your next turn. You may play an additional land this turn. I just read the words next turn. That makes this card a little bit better than I thought it was. The turn that you play this, you're probably not playing much of anything. You might play the extra land that you're allowed to play. But you already paid 5 mana. You probably don't have much mana left to play anything else. Maybe you get like a 2-drop out of it or something. But, as I just read this moment, next turn, you have those cards to choose from as well. This card just got a whole lot better. I originally had this as an F. It is not an F. I think it's around probably like a C+ to a B-. It's still random. You could still whiff and get a whole bunch of lands and like 2 drops or something, but you still draw 2 drops. This is some card draw that red-green doesn't necessarily get for the somewhat high price of somewhat taking turn 5 off. So I think this card's probably like a C+ in red-green. Make sure that you're aware, as I just discovered, that you can play those cards until the end of your next turn. So I'm going to put this at a C+ or so. I definitely want to see it given a go, because I think it could creep up into the B range, and maybe it is just too expensive, even though you do get an extra turn. But let's start at a C+ for Escape to the Wilds. Up next is Fischl O Elder. Fischl O Elder is 1 green-white for a 0/0 creature treefolk druid at rare. It's got vigilance. Fischl O Elder gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control, which will be at least 2. Tap for each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color. That means that this taps for green and white at the same time at a minimum. So it's a 2/2 for 3 that taps for 2 mana. That's decent ramp. I like playing 3-drop creatures that ramp me. This 3-drop double ramps me, and potentially triple ramps me if I have another color on the battlefield. But I don't think this is a 3-color format. The fixing is generally pretty bad, and you're actually very much incentivized to go a little bit stronger into 1 color. Yeah. I think this card's still really good, though. I think it's a solid B. If I'm green-white, you better believe I am jamming this into my deck. Solid B for Fischl O Elder. Up next is Garrick, Cursed Huntsman. Garrick, Cursed Huntsman is 4 black-green for a legendary planeswalker. Garrick at Mythic, he starts with 5 loyalty. For 0, create 2 2/2 black and green wolf creature tokens with, when this creature dies, put a loyalty counter on each Garrick you control. This is the only Garrick you'll have. -3, destroy target creature, draw a card. -6, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +3/+3 and have trample. You get Overrun the emblem. Garrick seems great. His 0 defends himself and potentially ups his loyalty if those wolves die, and you get 2 wolves. That's 2 creatures to protect Garrick every single turn. That's fantastic. And then you do get to kill something at least once and draw a card, all in 1 ability there. And then if you can get those wolves to die, then you potentially get to kill some more stuff. And if you do ever get to the 6, which I think could be tricky, I think if those wolves are dying left and right, you may not be in a position that having Overrun is going to super help you. But at least then, if Garrick is still alive after -6ing, you're making 5/5 wolves. I don't know. Garrick is fantastic. Just a solid slam dunk first pick. I think he's an easy A. I don't think I'll push up to A+. But it could almost be there. 6-mana planeswalkers have to be massively impactful, and Garrick is extraordinarily super impactful. But you know what? Let's be kind to him. He's been gone for a long time. A+ for Garrick. Up next is Grum Gully the Generous. Grum Gully the Generous is 1 red-green for a legendary creature Goblin Shaman at uncommon. It's a 3/3. Each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. If you're red-green, you desperately want Grum Gully. That's the non-human colors, and you can get a ton of them. Making them all 1/1 better than they should be for no extra cost, because Grum Gully himself is a 3/3 for 3. Totally solid. I would just slightly avoid first picking this due to wanting to be a specific color combination, but there is some potential for splashiness here. But we'll see. I think Grum Gully is a solid B. Does exactly what that deck wants. Up next is Improbable Alliance. Improbable Alliance is blue-red for an enchantment at uncommon. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. Pay 4 blue-red, draw a card, then discard a card. So you get to loot on command for 6 mana. It's not a lot, right? I don't fully know where to put this card exactly. It comes down early, but it does nothing early. But then if you are blue-red, draw your second card, deck, then you're making 1/1s, which, they fly. 1/1 flyers for free, essentially, are always fine, but they're also not super exciting. A Sporecap Spider just laughs at you. And then 6 mana to loot and make a 1/1. If you're doing it on your turn anyways, is a lot, but it's a mana sink. So I don't know, I think Improbable Alliance is probably fine in the blue-red deck, but I don't think it's as desperate of an include, whereas if I'm red-green, I want Grum Gully. If I'm blue-red, I'll see if I can fit an Improbable Alliance. So in that blue-red deck, I think Improbable Alliance is like a C? I think it's like a C. I don't think it's too much better. So let's go with a C for Improbable Alliance. Up next is Inspiring Veteran. Inspiring Veteran is red-white for a creature human knight at uncommon. It's a 2/2. Other knights you control get +1/+1. A bear that anthems potentially a huge portion of your team is super solid. Again, I'd be hesitant to first pick this since it somewhat picks a lane, but it's very powerful. Every single red-white deck is going to be super happy with this. Solid B for Inspiring Veteran. Does what that deck wants. Up next is Mare Serpent. Mare Serpent is 4 blue-black for a creature serpent at rare. It's a 7/7 with flash. Pay a blue, sacrifice an island. Mare Serpent can't be blocked this turn. Pay black, sacrifice a swamp. You gain 1 life and draw a card. Pay blue-black, exile 5 target cards from an opponent's graveyard. Return Mare Serpent from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. This is an interesting and powerful looking card. It's a surprise 7/7 end of turn, which is definitely a very real threat. Your opponent may just be in a whole lot of trouble there, and potentially you could flash this in before blocks and suddenly eat a gigantic creature of theirs, and especially if it's unblockable that next turn, this will end games pretty much out of nowhere sometimes, or otherwise nearly end them and demand an answer. Then, even if answered, you can likely return it once without much of a hassle. The second time, might be a little bit harder. And if somehow the game isn't just over after all of that, turning your swamps into a card, solid. First pickable card, I think I'm happy to jump into blue-black for this card, and it's just solidly in the bomb range. I have Mare Serpent as an A-. Up next is Mare Pixie. Mare Pixie is green-blue for a creature fairy at uncommon. It's a 2/2 flying. Tap, add green or blue. Love it. 2/2 flying mana bear. That actually is somewhat of a pain because I want to definitely attack with my 2/2 flyer for 2, but I also want that mana. But those are all both very good choices, and you get to pick the best of 2 very good choices at any given time. Very good card. I think I'd be happy first picking this and looking into blue-green. It's that multicolored card first pick problem, right? But this is just a solid B. B for Mare Pixie. Up next is Oko, Thief of Crowns. Oko, Thief of Crowns is 1 green-blue for a legendary planeswalker Oko at Mythic. He starts with 4 loyalty. +2, create a food token. +1, target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elk creature with base power and toughness 3. -5, exchange control of target artifact or creature you control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. Making a food is fine, but it's not impactful, but it does jump Oko right up to 6 loyalty on his first turn for 3 mana, which is kind of nutty. And that food can have various options. This isn't exactly the food deck. It doesn't have the black payoffs if this is a green-blue deck that you're in, but it has the green payoffs plus the artifact payoffs, etc. +1 to turn something into an elk is great. We already talked about Kenrith's Transformation being a pretty solid card, and this is pretty decent as well. But it's not just removal or a variety of removal-ish. You can use it on your own creatures. Turn your little 1/1s into 3/3s, or turn that food into 3/3s that you aren't terribly using in this green-blue deck. And then if you do want a -5, you can exchange control of artifact, probably one of those foods, or a creature in exchange for one of your opponent's power 3 or less creatures, which isn't huge. Power 3 or less creatures typically aren't that impactful. You're typically looking to grab a creature with some sort of really cool ability, or perhaps a flyer or something like that. But all of Oko's abilities are just totally fine and solid. Doesn't protect himself, so I'm going to keep him out of the A range, I think, but I think he's a solid B, if not a B+. He does a lot of good things for only 3 mana. That 3 mana, I think, makes me go for definitely the B+ here. B+ for Oko. Good Planeswalker is good. Up next is Outlaws Merriment. Outlaws Merriment is 1 red, white, white for an enchantment at Mythic. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose 1 at random. Create a red and white creature token with those characteristics. You can make a 3/1 human warrior with trample and haste, or you could make a 2/1 human cleric with lifelink and haste, or you could make a 1/2 human rogue with haste, and when this creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to any target. I absolutely despise how digital card gamey this card is. I really hate it. I do not want to see more cards like this in the future. Having to randomly figure out what creature you're making, which I guess will be a D6 with 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6 being different ones, and then having to represent and remember which is the 3/1 and what the 3/1 has, and which is the 2/1 and what the 2/1 has, is going to be a pain in the butt in paper. I don't want these cards in paper. With that out of the way, for 4 mana, creating really any of these tokens every single turn is worth taking 1 turn off for. Unless you're already deep in trouble, or perhaps dying to flyers, these creatures should stabilize you and eventually take over the game. I'd first pick this probably always. I think it's just a solid A. Please never print anything like this ever again, or leave it to some stupid arena-only set. Up next is the Royal Scions. The Royal Scions is 1 blue-red for a legendary planeswalker, Will and Rowan. At Mythic, they start with 5 loyalty, +1 draw a card, then discard a card, +1 target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike and trample until end of turn. -8, draw 4 cards. When you do, the Royal Scion deals damage to any target equal to the number of cards in your hand, which is going to be at least 4. So we got looting. Cool. We got a little combat trick. That's nifty. It's not a combat trick because it's sorcery speed, but you know. And then the ultimate is great, but -8's a lot. You're not doing this for several turns, but they do start at 5 loyalty for 3 mana, going to 6 on their first turn, just like Oko might actually. But yeah, don't get me wrong. I think this is a very solid card, but they don't protect themselves at all, which is huge, especially when you're taking an early-ish turn off from developing the board to play this. I'm curious to see how it plays out, but I think it would be way safer to just pretend that this is a 5 or 6 drop planeswalker. Make sure you have creatures down first, then play them, then you're able to protect them, get them up to 9 and -8 hopefully. There's a lot of value here, and I think they are a solid B planeswalker, but the lack of removal, the lack of protecting themselves, keeps them out of the A range, I think. Just a B for the Royal Scions. They're good. They're good. You're never not first picking them, most likely, but just a B. Savvy Hunter is up next. Savvy Hunter is 1 black-green for a creature human warrior at uncommon. She's a 3/3. Whenever Savvy Hunter attacks or blocks, create a food. Sacrifice 2 foods. Draw a card. A 3/3 for 3 that makes some value is totally fine, always included if you're in black-green. Luckily, black-green has food kicking around already, so the hunter might not even have to make her own food for you to get at least that first sweet card draw. And then if she can attack or if she does block, potentially getting some more cards is even better. I think she's a solid B-. She's exactly what the black-green deck wants. Maybe even just a B in the black-green deck. Yeah, let's go with a B for Savvy Hunter. Shine Chaser is up next. Shine Chaser is 1 white-blue for a creature fairy at uncommon. It's a 1/1 flying vigilance. Shine Chaser gets +1/+1 as long as you control an artifact. Shine Chaser gets +1/+1 as long as you control an enchantment. Obviously, you need to be in blue-white artifact enchantments. You're not splashing this anywhere, I don't think. If it's a 1/1, it's worthless. If it's a 2/2, it's okay. It's a Windrake. And if it's a 3/3, congrats. You got a card that can be described with such great words as good. It's still not amazing, but it's definitely good. So yeah, B- in the right deck, and it does go down from there depending on your exact number of artifacts and equipments. If you're blue-white, but you've mostly just got artifacts, this is a Windrake. If you mostly have enchantments, it's probably a Windrake. But if you have a good mix, well, it might be a little bit better than a Windrake. B- for Shine Chaser. Up next is Steelclaw Lance. Steelclaw Lance is black-red for an artifact equipment at uncommon. Equipped creature gets +2/+2. Equip Knight, 1 mana. Equip, 3 mana. Do you have a lot of knights? Congrats! This is what playable good equipment looks like. 1 mana to equip. That is fantastic for +2/+2 at 2 mana. If you don't have a lot of knights, something probably went wrong in your black-red deck, and this is extraordinarily filler that you should look to cut. Very strong C+, if not a B-, if you are in black-red knights. Up next is Stormfist Crusader. Stormfist Crusader is black-red for a creature human knight at rare. It's a 2/2 with menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card and loses 1 life. This is interesting. I'll give it that. A 2/2 for 2 with menace is a fine card. And then at the beginning of my upkeep, both of us draw a card and lose a life. I don't really like that. You need to be really confident that your deck is significantly better than your opponent's deck, or perhaps because you're black-red, significantly faster than your opponent's deck, to really want to be giving them that extra card draw every single turn. I think it could work. I do remember not hating Howling Golem too much, even though a lot of people did, and I do remember not hating Kumena's Awakening that much, although Kumena's Awakening was significantly better because you could make it one-sided with the City's Blessing. Still, it feels really dangerous. Not only that, you could actually work yourself into a problem where your opponent's outracing you, and losing a life a turn is actually helping them a lot. So I'm going to keep Stormfist Crusader at a C+. I think it's one of the weaker of the rare multicolored cards here, other than like Dance of the Manse, for example. But yeah, the C+ for Stormfist Crusader. It doesn't feel quite what it should be doing, especially in black-red. It's a weird effect for black-red, but sure. C+ for Stormfist Crusader. Up next is Wandermare. Wandermare is 1 green-white for a creature horse at uncommon. It's a 3/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell that has an adventure, put a +1/+1 counter on Wandermare. This is way better than that Squire that gets +1/+1 until end of turn with adventures. If you never get a counter on this, you still have a totally fine playable card. You have a Centaur Courser, and then even 1 counter makes it very good. If you're flush with adventures, then oh boy. This will do some very real work, I think. I have Wandermare at a pretty strong B, assuming you're flush with adventures. If you somehow don't have that many, it's still fine. It's still totally solid 3/3 for 3. But yeah, a B for Wandermare. Our final non-hybrid gold card is Wintermore Commander. Wintermore Commander is white-black for a creature human knight at uncommon. It's a 2-star. With Death Touch, Wintermore's commander's toughness is equal to the number of knights you control, so it'll always be 1 since they themselves are a knight. Whenever Wintermore Commander attacks, another target knight you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Seems like a fine enough card. As a 2/1 for 2 with Death Touch that makes another knight indestructible, this is totally okay. With even 1 or 2 knights, this commander becomes a fantastic deterrent for your opponent attacking and can help creatures get in when need be, or at least eat something. A solid black-white card. I don't know if it makes me go into the colors. It feels a little bit weaker than some of the gold uncommons, but I think it's still a B-. B- for Wintermore Commander. That's the last of our multicolored non-hybrid gold cards, but we have 10 hybrid cards. Hybrid mana is back. If you haven't seen this before, the mana pips, for example, in Arcanists Owl are white, blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, blue. You can pay white, 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 or blue, 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 or white, white, blue, blue, or white, blue, 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 or blue, white, white, white. I think those are all the combinations to cast this spell. As a result, they look hard to cast, but if you're a blue-white deck, It's basically the same as 3 and a white or 3 and a blue, except it's both 3 and a white and 3 and a blue. It's actually easier to cast in a 2-color deck. And normally it has the upside of being able to go in a different deck. You could put Arcanists Owl in a blue-red deck and still cast it for blue, which you're not going to do. These 10 spells you should never be splashing for. They should be in the 2-color deck they belong in. Up first is Arcanists Owl, which is Azorius. For an artifact creature bird at uncommon, it's a 3/3 with flying. When Arcanists Owl enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact or enchantment card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. A 3/3 flyer for 4 is fine. It's not massively exciting, but it's fine. It'll do some pretty serious work if you cast it. Assuming you have a good amount of artifacts or enchantments, which you should in this color, you'll likely draw something off of it, so the card's just gravy. Doesn't pull me into the color strongly, but it's a solid include that you'll want. I think it's a B-. Flying is a big bonus here. B- for Arcanists Owl. Up next is Covetous Urge. Covetous Urge is Dimir for sorcery at uncommon. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from that player's graveyard or hand and exile it. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. I don't know about this card. I actually just recorded a big rant about how bad this card was until I went back and realized that it also says player's graveyard. If you're casting this as a Thoughtseize to try to get something out of their hand, it's way too random. There's way too high of a chance that you're just going to get nothing worthwhile taking for 4 mana and a card. There's a very real chance you might get literally nothing. The Graveyard Edition is interesting, but again, requires luck. It requires straight up luck for something relevant to have made its way to the graveyard that's worth a card and 4 mana. Until that happens, this card does basically nothing. You could spin the wheel and take a look at their hand and potentially completely whiff. So I really don't like this card. I really don't want to give it a go. I'm starting really low on it at a D. It was an F before I read the graveyard part, but even with the graveyard part, I think it's a D. There's way too much variability in what this card can actually do for me to ever really want to give it a go. So I've got Covetous Urge at a D. Up next is Deathless Knight. Deathless Knight is Golgari for a creature skeleton knight at uncommon. It's a 4/2 haste. When you gain life for the first time each turn, return Deathless Knight from your graveyard to your hand. I don't like 4/2s for 4. I talk about that a lot. It's one of my least favorite stats. If they have haste, they're a little bit better, but not too much. But if they can come back to my hand when I gain life, and I'm in the food deck where I have the option of gaining life generally for 2 mana when I want, hopefully, it's interesting, except the big bonus of a 4/2 haste for 4 is those turns where my opponent attacks me with everything and they don't have a blocker, and surprise, they take 4, but it's not a surprise after the first time it returns to my hand anymore. My opponent knows that that's coming. They'll keep a 2/2 back or whatever. So I'm not a huge fan of Deathless Knight here. I think it's fine. I don't even think it's fine. I don't know that I actually actively want to play this card in my black-green deck. If I have it, if I picked it up at some point, there just wasn't another pick in the pack and I took this, I think I wouldn't include it. I think this is actually a C-. I think I actually would prefer to not play this card. I would if I had it and, I had a 22 card deck and I needed a 23rd card. I think I'd pop this in, but I think I actually don't really care for this card. C- for Deathless Knight. I think I'm going to cut it a decent bit. Keep in mind as well, there is some rule stuff here. Lifelink, where this creature dies in combat and you gain some life off of something, will not return this because the lifelink and the death happens at the same time. By the time the Deathless Knight is in the graveyard, the life has already been gained. You do have to get this back through life gain from some other time other than when it dies. Up next is Elite Headhunter. Elite Headhunter is Rakdos for a creature human knight at uncommon. It's a 2/3 menace. Pay Rakdos, and sacrifice another creature or an artifact. Elite Headhunter deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. These are all fine things, but 4 mana and then 3 to activate, and I have to sack something just to shock a creature, not a player, is all pretty underwhelming. This does not pull me into black-red, but if I'm already there, I'll play it. It's a Menace Knight. It's a 2/3. Maybe I get some value off of the activated ability. We'll see. I think it's just a C+, not going out of my way to play it, but I probably always will if I'm in those colors. Not a high pick. Up next is Fireborn Night. Fireborn Night is Boros. For a creature human knight at uncommon, it's a 2/3 double strike. Pay Boros. Fireborn Night gets +1/+1 until end of turn. A 2/3 double strike for 4, so a 4/3 essentially is fine, and it, has the upside of blanking any X2s. The boost is nice, but realistically you're only doing it once. Maybe twice if you hit 8 mana in your aggressive red-white deck, but even twice will make this a real monster, and the threat of activation is very real. Your opponent, if this attacks them and they see that you have 4 mana, they have to assume it's a 3/4. And if they opt to not block as though it's a 3/4, you can just use that mana for something else, or you can get that mana through. And of course, it's not actually a 3/4, it's going to deal 6 damage if you do pump it. Obviously, you're always playing this in red-white, but I also think that this does ever so slightly pull me into red-white, unlike a lot of these other hybrid cards. The extra toughness boost, I think, bumps this up to a B-. B- for Fireborn Night. Up next is Lock Dragon. Lock Dragon is it? For a creature dragon at uncommon, it's a 3/2 flyer. Whenever Lock Dragon enters the battlefield or attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. This card is amazing. It's a Snapping Drake that rummages if I want on ETB and attack. Sold. It's great. It 100% enables the blue-red draw 2 cards plan. I think this is a solid B. This 100% pulls me into blue-red. This card is the dream card for every blue-red deck. Solid B for Lock Dragon. Up next is OKane Ranger. OKane Ranger is Selesnya for a creature elf knight at uncommon. It's a 2/2 with tap. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. But it's green-white. It can take an adventure, of course. Bring Back. Bring Back is also Selesnya for a sorcery adventure. Create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens. Yay. This one feels weird. The adventure is obviously wildly overcosted and sorcery speed. That's awful. But green-white wants to go wide, and then once the ranger's on the table, you can tap the ranger and they can be 2/2s, and then we still have a worse version of Call the Cavalry, I guess. I don't know. I feel like a go wide strategy needs to also be attacking relatively regularly, so I think I'd rather just get the ranger down ASAP and start using that ability rather than take a full turn off to get the 1/1s and then a full turn off probably to get the ranger down, and it still can't be activated until the next turn. So 3 turns later, those 1/1s are on demand 2/2s. I'm gonna need to get a real feel for this creature, but I'm gonna start it at like a C+, based entirely on the ranger itself. Maybe it's a B- just based on the ranger. If you can afford the time to adventure first, great. I'm just hesitant about reliably doing that. Let's put OKane Ranger at a... I'm generous today. B- for OKane Ranger. I just think the two sides of it are a little bit not at odds, but I feel like you really want to make your choice very carefully as to what you do with this creature. Up next is Rampart Smasher. Rampart Smasher is Gruul for a creature giant at uncommon. It's a 5/5. Rampart Smasher can't be blocked by knights or walls. It's a 5/5 for 4 with an upside that part of it's relevant. The knights part is relevant. The walls part isn't terribly relevant. This card's great. It's just a B-. It's what Gruul wants to do, which is cast a big creature for less mana than you normally would. It's real good. It's very real good. Pick this card. It's a B-. It's great. Every single Gruul deck is very happily going to play it. I don't know that it pulls me into it, but the second I'm red-green, this becomes a very high pick. B- for Rampart Smasher. Our second last gold card for today is Resolute Rider. Resolute Rider is Orzhov. For a creature human knight at uncommon, it's a 4/2 for 4. Hurrah! Pay Orzhov. Resolute Rider gains lifelink until end of turn. Pay Orzhov. Resolute Rider gains indestructible until end of turn. So I don't really like 4/2s for 4. We just talked about that with Deathless Knight. But this one, I can pay 3 mana for to make it indestructible. That makes it a lot more like a 4/15 or something, a 4/75. 4 power is a lot. 2 power is very little, but it doesn't matter if it's indestructible. The lifelink's cute, and maybe sometimes I'll pay 5 to make it indestructible in lifelink, but I think this one's a lot better because of that potential indestructible clause. That's a real good ability there, and I think this is a pretty decent card. I think you play this in every single Orzhov deck that you're in, and I think it's another B-. B- for Resolute Rider. Our final card for today is Thunderous Snapper. Thunderous Snapper is Simic for a creature turtle Hydra. Yeah, it's a multi-headed turtle. At uncommon, it's a 4/4. Whenever you cast a spell with converted mana cost 5 or greater, draw a card. This is limited. I don't care how rampy you are, you're probably not casting that many 5+ CMC cards. Luckily, a 4/4 for 4 is totally fine and playable at the C level, and it creeps into the C+ level. And if you do draw one card off of this, we're definitely at the C+ level. Don't get greedy though. Don't pick this card and then say, haha, I am the 5+ mana deck, and play like 7 or 8 5+ mana cards. You're gonna die. You're gonna die real bad. But this is a strong C+. If you're in green blue, I think you always play it. I just don't think it's insane. C+ for Thunderous Snapper. So that's going to wrap it up for all of the gold cards, both regular gold and hybrid gold. Let me know what your favorites were here, what you're excited for. These cards obviously give a very clear sign of what the 10 decks are supposed to be, or at least the 10 two-color decks are supposed to be. Let me know what grades you agree with, disagree with, etc. in the comments down below. Talk with me, talk with each other. As always, you can find me over on Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find me at patreon.com/ShamanAleek if you want to become a backer there and help out like the great group of people who already do. You can go over to inkedgaming.com and use the promo code MANALEEK10, all one word, 10 is the number, to get 10% off your order and help out the channel. You can help out the channel the easiest way, of course, by sharing, and subscribing. If you do have any questions, though, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow when we wrap up Throne of Eldraine with the artifacts and the lands, which is also a lengthy video. There's like 34 cards. There's more cards tomorrow than there are today. See you all tomorrow.